Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're looking for a really quick but also thorough understanding of what's unfolding in Nepal right now, well, you've come to the right place.
Absolutely. We've been digging into some fascinating source material.
Yeah, specifically around this pretty remarkable Gen Z revolution. And what we've got isn't just observation, it's like an actual operational blueprint, wouldn't you say, for, well, national renewal.
That's exactly what makes this particular deep dive so interesting. We're not just looking back at history. We're analyzing two, frankly, incredibly detailed strategic roadmaps for a fundamental shift. A political one, yes, but also technological.
Right. It feels like the Gen Z movement there has hit a real inflection point. They've kind of pushed back against the old system.
Rejected the old guard. Yeah,
And now the challenge is building the new state. That's the hard part.
it always is.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Our mission today is to really dissect these two proposed strategies for making that happen. The sources, they keep talking about ushering Nepal into what do they call it? A corruption-free, meritocratic digital state.
That's the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And the two paths laid out are distinct, but also kind of spiritually aligned, you could say. They're termed the revolutionary path and the electoral path.
Two different routes to the same destination, potentially.
Potentially. And, looking across all the source material we have, there's this one core thesis that just keeps coming up. It seems precisely. The mantra they propose, it's quite powerful. Dharma over power. That's presented as the bedrock. That integrity, that sense of duty and righteousness, it has to be basically coded into the new system from the start. Otherwise, the sources are pretty blunt. The whole effort is doomed to fail.
Okay, Dharma over power. Let's keep that in mind. #I. Defining the two roads to renewal. So let's start by really defining these two roads, because they seem to represent a fundamental choice, maybe between speed and, well, getting justice first.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take the revolutionary path first. Now, when you hear revolution, you often think instability, maybe confrontation, right?
Yeah, chaos, uncertainty.
But the picture painted in these sources is quite different. It's described as highly disciplined, almost clinical even, a structured restructuring.
Clinical restructuring, okay. Yeah. The goal here is immediate, peaceful institutionalization of the change they want. So this path calls for a new interim constitution, a new interim government, but established through a process that's all about building institutions carefully, not, inciting chaos.
So less about tearing down, more about building up immediately, like a political hard reset.
Exactly, a hard reset. The idea is the moment that Gen Z energy reaches its peak, you immediately channel it, funnel it into a stable legal framework before it dissipates or gets co-opted.
Got it. So the outcome they're aiming for with this faster path is an immediate switch right into that corruption-free, meritocratic, digitally transparent state, using that popular mandate to essentially bypass the old entrenched political structures.
Yes. It's a strategy designed to, as you say, institutionalize the revolution's energy while it's still potent, while it's still hot.
Okay, that's the revolutionary path. Speed and structure.
Correct. Now, contrast that speed with the second option, the electoral path. This one acknowledges that, look, Nepal is a democracy, or aiming to be a functioning one. So the ultimate transformation, ideally, should happen through democratic means.
Yeah.
Through the ballot box.
It makes sense. But there's a catch, right?
There's a huge prerequisite, a critical step that must come first, according to these sources.
And that's the justice before ballots principle. That's the lever they're insisting on.
It's framed as a moral necessity.
Yeah.
The argument is really strong here. The revolution wasn't just fought to shuffle politicians around. It was fought to end corruption, to end impunity.
Right.
So if you just hold an election without first holding the high-profile actors of the old guard accountable for past crimes, past abuses,
Yeah.
then you're basically legitimizing the very corruption you fought against.
Wow. So the election itself becomes a problem.
It becomes, and this is a warning in the sources, a kind of cosmetic exercise,
Right.
a way to sanitize the old system without fundamentally changing it.
I see. So on this electoral path, the absolute first priority is visible accountability. You need to see justice being done, rebuild public trust first. Then you pave the way for maybe a new political force, a transparent one, to go for that big electoral mandate.
Exactly, a transformative mandate. So you see, the methods are quite different. One is rapid constitutional change. The other is judicial cleansing, followed by elections. But the destination, the end goal, it's presented as identical.
A new Nepal, free from what they call the triple threat: corruption, casteism, and chaos.
underpinned by transparency and, crucially, national unity. This kind of dual blueprint, it suggests they're thinking strategically, trying to ensure that no matter how the political winds blow, there's a plan, a clear path forward.
Okay, let's dive deeper into the revolutionary path then, because it requires more than just will. It needs structure. A structure capable of scaling incredibly fast, but without losing that moral core we talked about.
That's the challenge, and this is where this fascinating concept comes in. The 11-11-11-11-11 framework. It sounds a bit like code, doesn't it?
It does. 11, 11, 11, 11. What is it?
It's proposed as a decentralized democratic structure, designed to be, well, almost technically perfect. Almost too clean to be real, as you hinted.
So how does it work practically?
The genius, supposedly, is combining simplicity with rigor. So imagine at the very base level, say, in a village or a city ward, 11 individuals come together. Just 11.
Okay.
And here's the key. They must unanimously elect one leader from among them.
Unanimously. Not just a majority. 11 out of 11 have to agree.
Correct. That unanimity is the non-negotiable filter. It's central to how this model is supposed to prevent corruption from creeping in right at the start.
Why unanimity? What's the thinking there? It sounds difficult to achieve.
It is difficult, but that's kind of the point. It serves several critical functions, according to the sources. First, it forces genuine consensus. Think about it. A standard majority vote, 51%, it almost rewards polarization, right? You can win by dividing people. But unanimity forces the group to find the least polarizing person, the most trustworthy, the most competent individual that everyone in that room can respect, regardless of their background or faction.
It filters out the charismatic manipulator, maybe, in favor of someone with actual integrity.
That seems to be the idea. And second, it builds in immediate accountability. If that leader, the one chosen unanimously, fails or becomes corrupt, well, the 11 people who put them there, they're all kind of implicated, aren't they? They share the responsibility.
Interesting. Collective buy-in, collective responsibility.
Exactly. So that's the base level. 11 people, one unanimous leader.
And the power of this model is how it scales up, the vertical integration.
Precisely. This simple process just repeats itself. 11 of those newly elected local leaders get together, they meet, and they unanimously elect the leader for the next level up.
And this goes up 5 levels in total. That's the 5 11s.
That's the 5 11s. Village word, then maybe area, district, province, national. It creates this self-organizing, supposedly transparent hierarchy. And the sources make a pretty bold claim here.
Which is?
That this mechanism is so rapid and so resistant to the usual political infighting that it could build a unified national organization, literally connecting the remotest villages right out to the global Nepali diaspora in just a matter of weeks.
Weeks. That's incredibly fast for building a national structure.
It is. It's essentially trying to apply the efficiency of like modern distributed networks, maybe even fractal patterns, to political organization, to completely circumvent the decades of bureaucracy and infighting that plagued the established parties.
Okay, so let's say this structure forms. It gains national scale. It has this moral authority from the unanimous selection process. What's the next step in this revolutionary path playbook?
The sources outline a very specific and importantly peaceful action plan. It doesn't involve storming buildings.
Right. It starts with formality, you mentioned.
Yes. The newly formed national organization would formally notify the sitting interim government, the one led by Sushila Karki. At the time, the sources were likely focused on, they'd notify them of its existence, its structure, its mandate.
So it's transparent, not a coup.
Exactly. The emphasis is on transparency and trying to maintain institutional continuity where possible. They're not depicted as seizing power, but rather formally requesting a transition based on what they claim is the people's organized will.
Okay, notification first, then comes the show of force, the Nepal band.
Yes, the nationwide closure. But again, the sources are very, very careful about the messaging. This one-day shutdown isn't framed as an act of defiance, like a typical strike.
How is it framed then?
As a symbolic request movement. Picture this. Massive, coordinated, but entirely peaceful rallies happening all across the country, everyone with a single unified message.
What's the message?
Essentially, we, the organized people of Nepal, represented by this new structure, respectfully request the current leadership naming Sushila Karski and perhaps President Ramchandra Pawel to step aside peacefully. Make way for this revolutionary interim government. It's about converting that moral authority into an overwhelming but nonviolent political statement.
A collective nationwide request. That's a powerful image. And if the leadership agrees, this mandate then establishes the interim government, using a pre-written framework.
Correct. They wouldn't be starting from scratch. They would adopt a model interim constitution. The sources actually point out that a draft is available online at a website called democracyfornepal.com. So the legal groundwork for this proposed corruption-free digital state, it's supposedly already laid out.
And the leadership proposed for this interim government, it's quite specific, isn't it? In connecting moral leadership to technical know-how.
Very strategic. The sources insist that the interim government must be led by the chairperson of the Kalkiism Research Center, KRC.
The KRC. We'll need to talk more about them, but why their chairperson specifically?
The justification given is simple, but quite profound in its implications. The KRC is presented as the institution that actually developed the detailed technical blueprint, the plan for the digital state, the anti-corruption mechanisms, what they call the vaccine against corruption.
Ah, so the KRC holds the intellectual property, so to speak, the institutional knowledge needed to implement this complex vision immediately.
That's the argument. The leader isn't chosen for past political maneuvering, but for their demonstrated commitment and capacity to deliver on this specific technical and ethical roadmap.
Okay. And what about stability? You can't just replace everyone overnight.
No, and the sources acknowledge that. They propose retaining the existing Home Minister, at least initially, and perhaps other essential cabinet members to ensure basic functions continue smoothly. But crucially, there's a firm commitment stated. Hold free and fair general elections within 1 year under the new interim constitutional mandate.
So it's a rapid path, but with built-in steps for transition and eventual elections, a way to try and deliver systemic, ethical, and technological change quickly before that revolutionary energy fades or gets compromised.
Precisely. That's the essence of the revolutionary path, as described.
That revolutionary path, I mean, the timeline alone sounds incredibly ambitious. What if that window of opportunity closes? Or if the movement decides that path is too risky, that's where the focus shifts entirely to the electoral path, right?
Exactly. And the core principle here, the absolute non-negotiable, is justice before ballots. Accountability first.
And the argument is, this isn't just about changing faces in government. It's about fundamentally purging the system of impunity.
Absolutely. The sources hammer this point home. Justice is the first step.
Yeah.
Because if the corrupt old guard, the establishment figures, are simply allowed to run in the next election,
Well,
what happens?
they use their existing networks, their money.
Exactly. Their ill-gotten wealth, their connections, they potentially win again or at least retain significant power, and the entire revolution, all that energy and sacrifice, is basically undone. So accountability must precede elections. It's about restoring the very meaning of the rule of law before you even talk about voting.
And the sources don't just talk in abstracts here, do they? They actually name specific targets, presumably to show what real political will would look like.
To do. The most prominent example cited is the call for former Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli to face prosecution.
Wow, a former PM.
Yes. And it's tied specifically to his alleged responsibility during a massacre that occurred while he was serving as Home Minister much earlier in his career. The implication is clear. Holding someone of his stature accountable not just for minor graft, but for serious human rights abuses, would send an absolutely and unmistakable signal that things have fundamentally changed.
And this demand for accountability, it doesn't stop at the top politician, does it? It extends down through the system.
It has to. The sources stress it must also include senior police officials who might have issued unlawful orders or were complicit in abuses. The logic is, if the entire chain of command involved in past wrongdoing doesn't face proper legal scrutiny, how can you ever depoliticize the security forces? Corruption and coercion will just continue through the administrative state.
Makes sense. So to actually deliver this kind of justice, the existing anti-corruption machinery needs a serious overhaul. It needs to be reactivated, but differently.
Totally reactivated. And maybe we should pause, like you said, and just clarify which institutions we're talking about here for listeners who might not know the specifics of Nepal's system.
Good idea.
We're primarily talking about key bodies, like the CIAA, that's the Commission for the Investigation of Abuse of Authority. It's Nepal's main anti-graft body. Then there's the Special Court, which is meant to handle corruption cases, and the National Vigilance Center.
Okay, CIA, Special Court, National Vigilance Center.
Right. And the demand isn't just that they get more funding. It's that they must be granted total independence. They need to operate fearlessly, without political interference, and crucially, under intense public scrutiny. They need to transform from being, frankly, often seen as politically manipulated tools into genuine engines of forensic justice.
So, if you're the interim home minister tasked with this on the electoral path, how do you prove this commitment is real? How do you build that public trust needed before an election? Because people are cynical, right?
Deeply cynical, and understandably so. The minister has to deliver visible, tangible results. We're not talking about reports and commissions. We're talking about things people can see,
Like what?
like high-profile arrests based on solid evidence, the initiation of thorough, credible investigations that look like they can actually lead to convictions, and importantly, the immediate implementation of concrete, legal, and administrative reforms designed to stop these things from happening again. Rules, procedures, oversight.
So show, don't just tell.
Exactly. Without that kind of decisive action, that show of force against impunity, the sources warn that voter cynicism will just corrode the legitimacy of the entire electoral path. People won't believe the election means anything different this time.
Okay, so let's assume when that process of accountability starts. Justice is demonstrably underway. The focus then has to shift to the political mechanics, doesn't it? Specifically, unity. You mentioned fragmentation is a killer for these movements.
It's the Achilles heel, historically. The sources really emphasize this. All that energy, especially from the youth, it's powerful, but it can be diffuse. It must consolidate, ideally under a single unified party banner if they're going the electoral route.
Was there an attempt to do that early on, using an existing party maybe?
There was a significant potential opportunity discussed in the sources. The idea was to use an existing framework, specifically by restructuring the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, or RSP. It's a newer party that had gained some traction.
Okay, the RSP. How would that restructuring have worked? Who would they bring in?
Well, the idea floated, according to the sources, was quite compelling. Bring in someone like Coleman Gissing as a clean, respected chairperson. He's widely admired for his work in fixing Nepal's power cuts. His integrity is seen as impeccable.
Okay, Gissing as chair.
And then bring in popular reformist mayors like Balen Shah from Kathmandu and Harka Sampang from Dharan. These guys have huge grassroots support, seen as embodying that new, competent, non-traditional leadership style.
Wow, that sounds like a potentially powerful coalition. Gissing for integrity and national profile, Shah and Sampang for the grassroots energy and proven local governance.
It would have been formidable, yes. It could have instantly given the movement a ready-made political vehicle, bridging that gap between sort of institutional experience, or at least structure, and the raw energy of the street.
But it didn't happen. The sources say that opportunity was lost.
It seems so. The sources state that the window closed pretty abruptly when Swarnim Weigel, who is a key figure within the RSP, publicly dismissed the idea of this kind of radical restructuring. He poured cold water on it.
Why would he do that?
The sources don't delve deeply into his motivations, but they frame it as a critical failure. A failure of imagination, maybe, or perhaps an unwillingness by the existing RSP leadership to dilute their own control. Whatever the reason, the conclusion drawn in the material is stark.
Which is?
That the RSP, in its current form, proved it couldn't adapt or rise to meet the revolutionary demands of the moment, and because that opportunity was missed.
It necessitates the formation of a completely new party, a true Gen Z political party built from the ground up, dedicated solely to implementing this reform blueprint.
That appears to be the implication drawn from the failure of the RSP restructuring idea.
Yeah.
A new vehicle becomes necessary.
Okay, so if a new party is needed, or even if the revolutionary path requires interim leadership, the question becomes, who leads? Who embodies the spirit and the demands of this movement? And the sources seem pretty unequivocal on this, pointing to one figure consistently.
Yeah, it's hard to miss. When you talk about the authentic face of this revolution, the name that comes up again and again is Balen Shah. He's consistently framed, as the source material puts it, as the people's prime minister in waiting.
Balen Shah, the mayor of Kathmandu. Why him? What makes him stand out so much?
Well, his rise itself is symbolic, isn't it? It wasn't typical of the old political order at all. It's seen as being founded purely on meritocracy and integrity. He didn't inherit his position through family ties or party loyalty. He won as an independent, largely based on his perceived competence and honesty.
And his performance as mayor seems to be reinforcing that image.
Definitely. His time as Kathmandu mayor is presented as the working template for what the Gen Z movement wants nationally.
What specifically about his governance style resonates so much?
It's described as data-driven, first of all, using technology. Fearlessly transparent. He's known for, live streaming meetings, being very direct, and accountable. He's taken on entrenched interests, tried to bypass bureaucratic roadblocks, and focused on delivering visible results, sometimes controversially, but always directly.
So he's like living proof that the kind of administration they envision, corruption-free, digitally empowered, responsive, is actually possible, at least on a city level.
That's exactly how he's positioned. And crucially, his appeal seems to cut across traditional divides. He connects with the urban, educated class, but also villagers, the youth obviously, and even the diaspora. He seems to unite different segments in a way the old parties just can't anymore.
So the sources basically see him as the undisputed first choice for either an interim leadership role or to lead a new political party.
Yes, the public trust he appears to command is seen as an invaluable asset.
But as we discussed, moral leadership and public trust, while essential, aren't enough to run a complex 21st century digital state, especially one being built from the ground up. You need the policy, the technical know-how.
Absolutely. And this is where the other key piece of the puzzle comes in, the intellectual foundation. That's provided by the Kalkiism Research Center, the KRC. They're presented as absolutely indispensable.
KRC again. So they're not just providing the leader in the revolutionary path scenario, they're the policy engine, regardless of the path taken.
That's right. They are credited in the sources as being the only institution, really, that has produced a comprehensive, detailed, technical blueprint for the kind of systemic overhaul Nepal needs. That whole concept of the vaccine against corruption, that's their framework.
Okay, let's unpack that vaccine a bit more.
Yeah.
Because this is where the whole idea of a digital state gets concrete. How exactly do they propose using technology to achieve, or at least drastically reduce, corruption? It sounds almost like science fiction.
It does sound advanced, but the proposals described are quite specific, grounded in existing technologies. The KRC's zero corruption model seems to be built on two main pillars: AI, artificial intelligence, and blockchain auditing.
Okay, start with the AI. What role does AI play in fighting corruption in public finance?
The AI is envisioned as a kind of objective, tireless, nonpartisan watchdog. Its job is to constantly analyze massive amounts of data. We're talking procurement records, budget allocations, vendor databases, payment schedules, everything.
And what's it looking for?
Anomalies, patterns, red flags that humans might miss or, frankly, choose to ignore. For instance, if bids for a government contract consistently come in suspiciously close to each other, suggesting collusion, or if one particular company, maybe with political connections, keeps winning contracts across totally different ministries, defying probability. The AI flags these patterns in real time for immediate human investigation.
So it's about taking human bias and discretion out of the initial oversight process.
That's a big part of it, making oversight data-driven and harder to manipulate politically.
Okay, that's the AI finding potential problems. What about blockchain? How does that fit in?
Blockchain tackles the other side of the coin: accountability and transparency. The idea is to use blockchain technology to create an immutable public ledger for all government financial transactions.
Immutable meaning it can't be secretly changed later.
Exactly. Every single step, from the approval of a development project budget to the awarding of the contract to the final payment made to the vendor, would be recorded on this distributed ledger. And crucially, it would be accessible.
Accessible to whom?
Potentially to the public,
Yeah.
or at least to independent auditors in real time. Imagine citizens being able to see verifiably where public money is going.
Yeah.
Corruption thrives in the dark in opaque systems.
Yeah.
Blockchain, in theory, forces radical transparency.
AI for detection, blockchain for transparency and proof. That's a powerful combination.
It is. And the KRC's proposals, according to the sources, go beyond just auditing. They also talk about tackling core economic issues like unemployment. They advocate for things like state-supported digital cooperatives. The idea seemed to be about creating structures that guarantee jobs, possibly by linking digital skills training directly to market needs identified through data analysis. They also propose, as mentioned, that data-based public finance transparency system where every taxpayer could potentially verify how state revenue is being used.
And all of this falls under the umbrella of this Kalkiism philosophy.
Yes, it's presented as this unique blend. It combines economic innovation, like these digital cooperatives, with a strong emphasis on spiritual ethics, that Dharma over power idea again, and social justice principles.
And the sources seem to position this Kalkiism not just as a fix for Nepal.
No, definitely not. It's explicitly presented as potentially much broader, a sophisticated systemic policy model that could be relevant for the entire global South. For regions that are chronically struggling with deep-seated corruption, where the old political solutions just haven't worked. Kalkiism is offered as a kind of 21st century technology-infused alternative.
So when you put it all together, the sources are essentially arguing for an almost inevitable partnership, aren't they? Balen plus KRC.
It really reads that way. It's positioned as a necessary synergy. Balen Shah provides the public trust, the legitimacy, the popular mandate, And crucially, the fearless leadership needed to push through changes that will inevitably face massive resistance from vested interests.
He's the political shield and spearhead.
Right. And KRC provides the indispensable backend, the detailed 21st century policy roadmap, the technological frameworks, the software for the new state, if you will, the systems needed to make sure the change is not just temporary, but durable, measurable, and transparent.
It's like without KRC's plan, Balen's popularity might just be a moment, and without Balen's leadership, KRC's plan might just remain theory on a website.
That's a perfect summary of the dynamic presented in the sources. It's positioned as an essential alliance for any real transformation to occur, regardless of whether it happens via the revolutionary or electoral path.
Okay, let's pivot now fully to the electoral path and the idea of this new clean party. The sources set an incredibly high bar for success here, not just winning, but securing a two-thirds majority in parliament. I mean, honestly, is that even realistic for a brand new political force, however popular its leader?
That's the immediate reaction, isn't it? It sounds hugely ambitious, maybe even idealistic.
Right.
But the sources are really insistent on this point. They argue it's not just ambitious, it's a strategic necessity. A simple majority winning 50% plus one,
Right.
what does that get you?
Control of the government, day-to-day administration.
Exactly. It allows for maybe some administrative changes, some policy tweaks, but it doesn't allow you to fundamentally change the rules of the game. A two-thirds majority is what's required in Nepal's system, as in many others, to amend the Constitution.
Okay. And constitutional amendment is key.
It's absolutely critical for the kind of deep systemic changes they're talking about. Things like enshrining judicial independence, reforming the police and security sectors, implementing those AI and blockchain auditing systems with real legal teeth, locking in the principles of the digital corruption-free state into the nation's foundational law.
So if they aim lower, say just for a simple majority, the risk is that the old establishment, even from opposition, can block the really crucial reforms. Or just reverse them later if they regain power.
Precisely. A two-thirds mandate is presented as the only way to make the changes permanent, to truly break the cycle. So yes, it's ambitious, but it's framed as the only goal that actually achieves the revolution's aims through electoral means.
Okay, accepted. Two-thirds is the target. How on earth does a new party, starting almost from scratch, achieve that? They need more than just a popular leader.
They need an incredibly sophisticated machine. The sources suggest learning from the best, adopting a hybrid structure, fusing that Gen Z digital savvy, their natural environment, with the kind of disciplined, on-the-ground organizational rigor you see in highly effective, established political machines.
Like who? Any examples given?
The sources specifically mention drawing lessons from India's BJP, for instance, which is known for its massive, disciplined, grassroots mobilization capacity.
Interesting. So combining digital reach with old-school shoe leather.
Kind of. The core philosophy described is pretty straightforward. Build the most technologically advanced, locally rooted, and transparently funded political machine Nepal has ever seen. A digital-first structure, but deeply embedded in every community.
Okay, let's walk through how they propose to build this machine. Mobilization first.
Wow.
How do you convert passive online support, likes and shares, into millions of actual verified voters and volunteers?
It starts with lowering the barrier to entry as much as possible. The sources highlight the missed call campaign.
The missed call, how does that work?
It's a tactic used successfully in many places, especially where mobile penetration is high, but maybe data access is variable. You advertise one single, very simple, memorable phone number nationwide, on posters, on social media, everywhere.
And people just call it and hang up.
Exactly. They give it a missed call, it costs them nothing. But that single missed call automatically logs their verified phone number into the party's central database. Boom. You've potentially generated a database of millions of interested contacts, literally overnight, with almost zero friction.
That's clever. Very low effort, high potential return. What happens after the missed call?
That's where the automation kicks in. That database feeds into an automated follow-up flow. People get an SMS, maybe a WhatsApp message, thanking them and providing a simple link.
A link to what?
To onboard them properly, get their details, the location, and critically plug them into local microgroups. And this is where the 1111 model we talked about earlier gets adapted again, this time for political campaigning.
The 1111 structure for the grassroots organization.
Yes, at the very base level. The local booth or ward committee, maybe built using that principle of small, tight-knit groups, becomes the absolute core operational unit. Their job isn't just waving flags, it's detailed data collection, neighbor-to-neighbor persuasion, and ultimately, the single most important task in any election, getting out the vote, GOTV.
And the sources emphasize the importance of that hyperlocal level.
Massively. Success isn't measured by the size of the central rally. It's measured by the efficiency and effectiveness of the individual booth captain and their small team. That's where elections are won or lost.
Okay, that's the structure. What about the message? A digital-first party needs a killer content strategy, right?
Absolutely. It needs to be relentless and relevant. The sources talk about needing a centralized content factory.
A content factory? Sounds industrial.
Well, it needs to operate in industrial speed and scale. We're talking rapid production of short, punchy videos. Think 30 to 60 seconds. Optimized for the platforms where Gen Z lives, TikTok, Instagram Reels, WhatsApp forwards.
And what's the content of these videos?
It's described as having a dual focus. On one hand, hard-hitting exposés of past corruption, naming aims, showing evidence, stuff that galvanizes anger and reminds people why change is needed.
Okay, fueling the outrage.
But paired with that, you need the positive vision. So the other focus is simplified, easily digestible explainers of the party's manifesto pillars. What are we actually offering? Presented clearly, visually, maybe using animation or simple graphics.
And crucially, this content needs to speak everyone's language, literally.
It must. Nepal is incredibly diverse linguistically. A one-size-fits-all message from Kathmandu won't work. The content factory needs the capability to rapidly localize everything, translating captions, maybe even re-recording voiceovers in different dialects, referencing local issues, ensuring the message feels personal and relevant to every single community.
That sounds like a massive logistical challenge.
It is, but doable with the right technology and a highly motivated volunteer base. And that leads to the idea of the volunteer economy. How do you manage and incentivize potentially hundreds of thousands of volunteers?
Beyond just appealing to their idealism.
Idealism is the start, but the sources suggest building a system of measurable, publicly recognized meritocracy. The party needs a platform, maybe an app, that tracks microtasks.
Microtasks? Like what?
Sharing specific video clips X number of times, registering Y number of new voters in your neighborhood, helping Z number of elderly people get their voter IDs. Small, concrete actions.
And you track this through the app.
Yes, and then, crucially, you reward it. High-performing volunteers, especially those effective booth captains, need to be publicly recognized. Maybe featured on the party's social media, given access to training, prioritized for internal roles later on.
So you build a clean, merit-based pipeline within the party itself. Power and influence are earned through verifiable work, not connections or money.
That's the ideal. It reinforces the core message of meritocracy and transparency right within the organization's own structure. It's Dharma over power in practice.
Okay, mobilization, content, volunteers. What about money? Politics costs money. How does a new party, especially one fighting corruption, fund itself without taking dirty money?
That's a critical question. The sources identify the Nepali diaspora as a huge potential asset here.
Right. Millions of Nepalis live and work abroad, sending huge amounts of money home.
Exactly. They're a massive financial resource, but also a network of influence and legitimacy. The playbook calls for establishing formal, transparent global chapters in major diaspora hubs, London, New York, Sydney, Dubai, wherever Nepalis are concentrated.
Formal chapters with proper bank accounts.
Yes, using legally registered entities and transparent online fundraising pages. No suitcases of cash. This provides an external funding stream, which is important because it can insulate the party somewhat from pressure or capture by domestic vested interests or corporations who might want favors later.
And the suggested funding model itself emphasizes transparency.
Very much so. Instead of relying on a few huge donations from shadowy figures, the recommendation is to build a broad base of small, regular contributions. A subscription model.
Like crowdfunding, people signing up for, say, $5 or $10 a month.
Exactly. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of small, recurring donations from both the diaspora and supporters within Nepal. And the absolute key here is radical transparency in accounting. The sources even mention the possibility of using blockchain to issue receipts for donations, making the party's finances publicly verifiable.
Wow. Blockchain for donations, too. That builds incredible trust if they can pull it off.
It aims to. It makes the party accountable to its mass base, not to hidden donors. It aligns the funding model with the core principles.
Okay, so they've got the structure, the message, the volunteers, the funding. What are they actually promising? What are those non-negotiable manifesto pillars needed to convince voters to give them that massive two-thirds mandate?
The manifesto, as described, Needs to be short, bold, and feel deliverable. The core pillars seem to be, first, digital democracy and zero corruption. That's the headline promise, enabled by the AI and blockchain auditing we discussed.
Okay, clean, transparent government.
Second, comprehensive social guarantees. Things like commitments to free healthcare, quality education for all, and access to justice, especially for the poor and marginalized. And importantly, suggesting these can be funded through innovative means, perhaps like new taxes on digital services or data, rather than just promising the impossible.
So, social safety net, funded smartly.
And third, a credible economic plan. This has to focus squarely on the youth bulge. So promises around job guarantees, maybe through those digital cooperatives, and state-backed programs to support youth entrepreneurship. Real economic hope.
Digital democracy, social guarantees, economic opportunity. Seems comprehensive. But people have heard promises before. How do they cut through the cynicism?
With concrete, immediate action. The sources strongly suggest including a specific 100-day promise in the manifesto.
A 100-day plan. What's in it?
Not vague goals, but concrete, measurable deliverables that will happen within the first 3 months of taking office if they get the mandate. Things like, we will file at least 50 major corruption cases against high-profile individuals based on pre-prepared evidence. We will put the entire public asset registry online for everyone to see. We will pass the foundational law for the AI auditing system.
So, immediate visible proof that they mean business. That this isn't just another election cycle.
Exactly. It's designed to demonstrate radical intent, build momentum, and show the population that the system is genuinely starting to shift on day one. Not just promising change sometime down the road. It's about converting electoral victory into immediate, tangible reform.
Okay, whether it's the interim government in the revolutionary path or the newly elected government after a successful electoral path campaign, there's one position that seems absolutely critical for making good on these anti-corruption promises. That's the Home Minister.
Absolutely pivotal. This role holds the levers for law enforcement, internal security, and overseeing the administrative machinery. The Home Minister is the one who has to turn that popular demand for justice into actual, durable institutional reform and accountability.
It's a huge task. Where does the Home Minister even start? The sources seem to outline a pretty clear roadmap.
They do. It has to begin, they argue, with immediate, confident forensic action. No hesitation.
Forensic action. What does that look like in practice, on the ground?
Well, first, it means setting up proper inquiries. Not just one investigation, but potentially multi-layered ones. Criminal investigations into potential crimes, administrative inquiries into misconduct by officials, maybe even human rights inquiries were relevant.
And who leads these? To avoid political bias.
That's crucial. The sources insist these inquiries must be led by genuinely independent prosecutors or investigators, people with integrity, insulated from political pressure from day one. That independence is non-negotiable.
Okay, independent inquiries, what else?
Second, you have to get the evidence right. The minister needs to establish a single, unified secretariat or task force responsible for consolidating all the evidence related to major past abuses or corruption cases. Police files, witness statements gathered by commissions, intelligence reports, financial records, bring it all together in one place.
Why is that consolidation so important?
Because you need to build rigorous, judicially sound cases. Cases that can withstand appeals, that won't get thrown out on technicalities because evidence was scattered or mishandled. It's about ensuring the prosecutions stick.
And throughout this process, maintaining public trust is key, right? How do they manage that?
Through proactive transparency. The sources stress this. The ministry shouldn't operate in secret. It needs to regularly, perhaps weekly, publish updates on the progress of major investigations. Not compromising the investigation by revealing sensitive evidence, of course, but confirming milestones. Investigation XYZ has interviewed 20 witnesses. Forensic audit of agency ABC is complete. Case file on official DEF submitted to prosecutors.
So, managing expectations and fighting the rumor mill.
Exactly. It builds public faith that the process is moving forward seriously and rigorously, even if complex cases take time.
Okay, investigations are launched, evidence is gathered. What then? The sources talk about using the full toolbox against corruption. What does that mean beyond just arresting people?
It means hitting corruption from every possible angle, not just criminal prosecution. So first, immediate asset recovery.
Going after the money.
Aggressively. Freezing suspected corruption-tainted assets domestically right away, but also launching proactive international cooperation. Using tools like mutual legal assistance, MLA treaties, to formally request help from other countries to trace, freeze, and eventually repatriate funds or assets hidden abroad.
That international part sounds tough, lots of legal hurdles.
It is notoriously difficult and slow, but it's essential. You have to show you're going after the money wherever it is. Domestically, though, action can be quicker. The sources emphasize immediate administrative sanctions, removing corrupt officials from their positions immediately upon credible findings of serious misconduct. And not just suspending them, but potentially implementing lifetime bans from holding any public office or even receiving government contracts, making the personal cost of corruption extremely high, even separate from criminal conviction.
Closing all the doors.
And to handle the expected volume of complex, high-profile cases efficiently and fairly, the sources strongly advocate for specialized courts.
Like the existing special court or new ones?
Potentially strengthening the existing one or even establishing new fast-track courts specifically dedicated to handling major corruption and potentially related human rights cases from the past. The key emphasis here is not just speed, but also adherence to international fair trial standards. Justice needs to be swift, yes, but it also needs to be seen as completely legitimate and legally sound, both domestically and internationally.
So independent inquiries, solid evidence, asset recovery, administrative sanctions, fair trials, that deals with past corruption. But how does the Home Minister ensure this doesn't all just happen again in 5 or 10 years?
That's the crucial next step. Structural reforms to prevent recurrence. This is the long-term work, the legacy building. It means changing the systems themselves.
Where do those structural reforms start?
A major focus is police depoliticization. This is fundamental. It requires implementing crystal clear rules, backed by law, on things like the use of force, on promotions being based strictly on merit and performance, not political loyalty or patronage. Establishing truly independent oversight bodies, maybe a police commission with real teeth, the power to subpoena, to investigate misconduct independently of the police command structure itself.
Taking politics out of policing.
As much as possible. And alongside that, significantly strengthening those other oversight bodies we mentioned, the CIA, the National Vigilance Center, boosting their independence, giving them more resources, better forensic capacity, maybe even expanding their mandates, making them genuinely feared by the corrupt.
And these deep structural changes like constitutional amendments for judicial independence or stronger oversight bodies, this brings us back to that two-thirds majority again, doesn't it?
It inevitably does.
Yep.
The sources consistently reinforce this connection. Piecemeal reforms, administrative tweaks, they can be undone. But embedding these changes into the Constitution, fundamentally rewriting the rules of governance that requires the kind of decisive political mandate that only something like a two-thirds majority held by a party genuinely committed to these reforms can provide.
So the sequence is clear. Justice first to build trust and legitimacy, then a decisive electoral mandate to lock in those gains through deep structural reform.
That's the essence of the electoral path's logic. Justice precedes the election, but the mandate achieved in that election is what makes the justice durable and the reform systemic.
You know, listening to all this detail drawn from the source material, it really elevates what's happening in Nepal. It's not just another protest movement. It's presented as this incredibly sophisticated strategic effort at national transformation.
It really is. The level of detail in the proposed blueprints is striking. And Nepal really does seem poised at this crossroads, doesn't it, between these two potential futures.
Yeah, on one side, the revolutionary path, that idea of rapid, organized renewal, driven by the KRC's technical blueprint, may be led by their chairperson initially. Very structured, very fast.
And on the other, the electoral path, more conventional in method perhaps, but with that radical prerequisite of justice first, fueled by a potential Balen Shah-led digital party aiming for that huge two-thirds mandate to enact lasting change.
Two very different processes. But what's fascinating, and you brought this up right at the start, is that the sources insist the success of either path comes down to the same thing.
Exactly. It hinges on maintaining that moral center. The unique power, the unique leverage that the Gen Z revolution in Nepal seems to possess, according to these texts, is its perceived moral clarity. That core idea, Dharma over power, duty, ethics, righteousness before political gain.
And the warning is they have to remain vigilant. The leaders, the movement itself, cannot become the very thing they fought against. That temptation of power is always there.
Always. And that's why those mechanisms we discussed, the unanimity rule in the 1111 model, the blockchain for transparent funding, the merit-based volunteer rewards, they're not just operational details. They're attempts to code that Dharma over power principle into the very DNA of the movement and any future government or party that emerges from it.
It feels like almost a 21st century evolution of how revolutions are conceived and managed, moving beyond just protest and outrage towards building sustainable, accountable, and technologically transparent systems from the outset.
It certainly seems like a template for that, doesn't it? Converting that raw, street-level passion into something durable.
So let's bring it back to you, the listener, maybe watching this unfold from somewhere else in the world. What's the bigger takeaway here? The sources themselves frame the challenge for Nepal's youth in pretty stark, almost absolute terms. They basically say, either we build a corruption-free Nepal now, or we lose another generation. It's incredibly high stakes.
It is, and that raises a really provocative question, I think, that goes far beyond Nepal's borders. It resonates across so much of the global south, and maybe even elsewhere. Nepal's Gen Z, driven by necessity, seem to have crowdsourced or developed this incredibly detailed, digitally native, scalable playbook for systemic reform.
A playbook combining digital organization, zero corruption policy tech, and this insistence on justice and moral clarity.
Right, so the question is, how many other nations out there, grappling with their own versions of crippling systemic corruption, are now watching this experiment unfold in Nepal, studying this blueprint, this fusion of tech, ethics, and political strategy, and hoping maybe that they can adapt parts of it, adapt it to channel their own generation's frustrations and revolutionary energy, not just into protest, but into building actual working, accountable digital states.
It really positions Nepal as a potential laboratory for the future of governance in developing democracies, doesn't it? The choices being made in Kathmandu, the success or failure of these incredibly ambitious plans, they could have ripple effects far beyond the Himalayas.
They really could. It's a space to watch very closely.